Dr. Kough works at the Shedd Aquarium and focuses on investigating invertebrate fisheries conservation. The group includes ecologically, culturally, and commercially viable species that are increasingly threatened by overfishing, habitat loss, and changing ocean conditions. In his research, Kough conducts diverse experiments, field surveys, and mathematical modeling to better understand these challenges and develop strategies to mitigate them. I'm going to let him just talk the rest about himself. And he'll also fix it.
Works. And I'm so sorry if sound sucks. That's on me. I should have said that I want speakers because I like to break things up with someone else talking, not me. So I'm Andy, Cal, like the animal Lou. And I like to start things out with a little bit of autobiography, right? So you can do a speed date of who I am and decide whether or not you're going to tune out and grab a beer. So born in Washington, D.C., this house, this dog, rest in peace, Buster. And I've always been an actress. Check out the kicks. I wish they came in my size now, but they don't. So every picture of me growing up, I'm either holding or harassing an animal, which is a trend so that's college. A trend that continues to this day, if it'll go, but long. Snakes. I love snakes. They're freaking awesome. And they played a really important role in my life because they got me in the door at nature centers. And since I was in high school, I was volunteering. Escalated into exotic animal stuff, which is horrifying. I hate big cats now. Not that I always thought I wanted to be a vet, right? Until my junior year of college, I worked in a vet office for 3 days and said, fuck this. It was the most negative, horrible experience of my life. Just sad, unhappy people, sad, dying animals, and not those. My hat's off to doctors, that's on crack. So I had this whole, what do I do? And I got really lucky that I made some decent acquaintance with some professors in college. And they tossed me into the woods where I had a job looking at birds. And I was smitten like a kid. It was just absolutely incredible. So I could go out and understand and research animals, how to protect them, and not have to deal with sad, unhappy people. In addition, I had the experience of going to Australia, which is the first place that I went scuba diving on Great Barrier Reef in 2006. And I also love that, really positive energy. You go down and you have this whole different world of color, texture, energy, and sound. And I was hooked enough that I convinced people from around the Indo-Pacific to send me live rock and money and set up a 500-gallon fish tank, which is still in existence. Yeah. And I did my undergrad thesis using electron microscopy to look at the biodiversity of life that comes on in different forms of live rock. After school, I bartended and valeted for a year to pay off the debts.
For your reef, right?
With the what?
For your reef?
No, fortunately, I left that in school, and then the dark frogs my mom killed, so I didn't have to deal with that, and snakes and teeth. But I worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then the Department of Natural Resources in Maryland for a year before going to graduate school, where I did a PhD in applied marine physics and marine biology, looking at the marvel journeys of spiny lobster. Yeah, what a great time. And the UM campus is great too, because they also have a feature right here called the Wet Lab, of which used to be student run and the cheapest beer in Miami from only local distributors, where you can see the sun rise and set. Pretty cool. Yeah, Matt props there. They got rid of liquor after an incident. Right, so that's... Oh yeah, okay, shit. We're at a scuba meetup thing, so I figured it's important to talk about the first time I went to saltwater and put on a mask and looked. And it was in the Virgin Islands in 2001. This is a crappy picture from the point and shoot. Here's the fish that I saw, and I was like, holy God, this is incredible. It was my mother and myself, and we're going off in Cinema Bay. We can afford a resort, we can afford a camping spot, and you can get in the water and start swimming, and there's a dead palm tree. We followed it down, and there's this little gem, and it was just incredible. This is a picture.
Yes, it is.
Actual resolution of my point and shoot again. Green. Yeah, the green that we saw. That same.
Was that on film or digital?
This is film. These are film.
Cool.
So my mom told me that I should get scuba certified, and I ignored her, like any sort of foolish child. So it took until later when I was in college to do my cert. And then my first working dive, where I went out not just like see things, but to interact, was in Zanzibar. So I lived in Africa for 6 months, and we had this whole project thing. I have no idea what I'm going to shit. But the reefs were incredible. No fish. But the whole purpose was to go out and find the remaining fish and spear them. Look specific parrotfish where you get like that conference to. But somehow I'm still around. This is the last fun dive I did, which was about 2 months ago. You can go out and just go zero visibility and look for shark's teeth.
Where at?
This was my haul off Venice Beach.
Venice Beach.
They don't even ask for your name; they just ask for $100. Free tanks. Yeah. So yeah, cool. Also, obligatory picture for camp. Some cute little thingies from Australia. Neat. Right. So I also like to break up talks with haikus because it's the only civilized way of communication. So here's our first one, and you can in these buckets that's me. You can tell because I have the same shirt, and those are filled with crayfish. So yeah, cool. So that's me, and now we'll talk about Queen Conch. This is a Queen Conch. Very charismatic. Way cooler than a beluga. Here's why they have cute gray eyes, right? But for conch, like so many different animals in our ocean, it's not what's on the outside, but what's on the inside. They're cows. And in this case, they're filled with a delicious foot meat. Wow. Which is also seen as an aphrodisiac as an cultural touchstone. So this is something that is important to preserve for both ecosystems and people throughout the Caribbean. It's also a very cheap, affordable protein. This is an animal that with shell, it's like 6-7 pounds. You can feed yourself very easily. So especially during COVID, there was a surge in people fishing as people just turned to the sea. Supply chains got fucked up. Okay, what do you see in this picture?
I see a boat.
Boat, conch shells. Yeah. So who's been on a cruise before? Yay, go cruise people. That's great. I have too. And the first place that I stepped off of a boat on a cruise was in Nassau. And the island that you step off on is right next to another island called Potter's Cay, which is entirely built of Queen Conch shells. As you go around, there are... the magnitude of this is stunning. There are roads made out of conch shells, walls made out of concrete, etc. And this isn't just a modern day thing, although it exploded after World War II when outboard motors became really easily accessible. But you can dig deep into some of these old mitten piles and you can find evidence from really high people who used one conch to slash another first list screwdriver.
What's a mitten?
A mitten is a line. So rather than talking about what's up with this, I will let top of
Good evening, Amazon. Germany explained this is the promise tonight that national mark. Restaurants are closing down and fishermen are going bankrupt. Environment say that this is a catastrophe. Once conch is gone, it's gone.
This pepper.
I've been diving, heard them say resources slow. I noticed things was getting slow, but man, I really thought that they was lying. How I
good conservation messaging.
could ever become mystery when all around me is the same. Oh my, should've left the babies in the sand. Why, oh, why? Should've given them chance to grow up, should've given them chance to multiply.
This goes on for like I'm just but if you're interested, it's really catchy and it's breakdowns by a wide range of this rice conch bar. So, I'm a scientist. What do scientists do? You just ask dumb questions and then try to figure a way of answering them. So the first question that I asked is, all right, there's all this evidence of overfishing. Is this real? Is this something we can quantify? Are these Queen Conch populations disappearing? So to do that, we turned to the Coral Reef 2, which is Shedd Aquarium's research vessel. No one said that they loved a boat host
No, they didn't.
aquarium because it's filled with humans, sometimes lice. So what we did, this vessel can deploy up to 12 scientists anywhere in the Northern Caribbean, and it acts as like a hub away from home. Is the pit. And basically what we did is we went out and we did extensive amounts of surveys using diving and snow patrol board. It's really easy, relaxing, anyone can do it. Relatively low risk unless you're thinking about the speed that you're going at, which is about tiger shark trawling speed. If you've ever gone on a towboard next to Tiger Beach in the Bahamas, you understand what I'm saying. Anyways, so we did that a lot. The only challenge is, of course, finding conch. So everyone can see the conch here, right? It's all about the eyes. The whole animal is a conch. They grow a natural smorgasbord of camouflage. This is the same animal if you look over. So they're slightly sneaky snails. Here's another example. This one's growing a beautiful octocoral on top of it. It's quite old. It has a beautiful shell. Happy and alive. Cool. So we did a lot of tailboarding for the first few years, which sounds like some sort of weird torture, but it's actually just marine pleasure. So we did a lot of tailboarding. We covered a lot of ground, and what did we find? Wow, what happy, smiling pictures of my sunburned hands. This is a gross oversimplification, taking thousands of points and cramming it to 42. And then basically what you see here is on the x-axis, increasing amounts of fishing pressure is associated with a decrease in the mean abundance of green conch. Shocking. So it's almost like fishing has shaped the population.
And how much did they pay you to find that out?
They sure did.
I think was we ranked for that.
It's important because we are able to provide this information to a country that has no fishery service to be able to study this themselves, so they can better prepare themselves and the country moving forward. Again, I hated being a vet because of the negativity. So, being an optimist, let's focus on the places where there's still conch, right? And so we'll sort of update this question a little bit. They're overexploited, but are there still populations in remote areas? Is there still hope for the species?
Yeah.
And now this is slightly explicit. It is a Tuesday night, so if anyone is opposed to look away. Okay, because this is actually a critical point about why this species has a conservation problem and is in trouble. They have internal reproduction. So unlike lots of animals that spawn their gametes up into the water column, you can see they literally come together. Whoa. Here's a better slow-mo for those who are curious. Be warned, this is graphic. You'll see the male taking his verge and searing sperm on the lady's like, okay. Oh boy. Whoa. Right? Pretty cool. I think that's cool anyways. You want to see sex while you're here? You should.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a male and lady. And then what? So because they do have internal fertilization, that means that these slow-moving snails have to literally come together to breed. So if you're a slow-moving snail, you have to find a mate. That means you need a lot of mates in one area. If you're a fisher, you're targeting areas where there's the most bang for your buck. So they're basically hunting down the orgies and taking them away, which then leads to a cascading negative impact, right? And that's exactly what's been found. At lower population densities, no lovemaking, versus at higher densities, lots of lovemaking. Cool. I've been very fortunate to be able to go survey some cool spots so this little speck of land here is Saba, and then the place that's 100 times larger than it is the Saba Bank. Pretty neat. Anyway, so what have we found in these areas that are quite far away from basically humans?
Yeah.
Well, lots of conch. The places with very few there are because they're nursery grass. That little line is the threshold for reproduction. Sorry for not explaining that. And it actually turned out to be the highest density that's been recorded in more than 30 years. Whatever.
Saba? In Saba?
No. The Keysal Bank of the Bahamas. That's insane. We struck out twice. 200 dives. 2 of them did not have conch. That's a lot of conch. It's similar to like Cuba. This is data that Pam helps collect, which is why I'm showing it. Isn't that hideous? It's just like a horrible shotgun. But these are from animals that we measured together. So on the x-axis is how big the animal is, and on the y-axis is how thick its shell is. So Queen Conch stopped growing lengthwise after about 3.5, 4 years, but they grow a thicker and thicker shell throughout their life. So how thick their shell is gives you a rough indicator of how old they are. If we look at where we surveyed, we went from pretty remote areas away from hungry mouths, closer to them. And if you recolor that shotgun blast based on how far away things are from people, you'll notice that the oldest, largest animals are furthest from people. Surprising, right? Yeah, and that's a trend that we notice basically throughout the Bahamas. So I've measured tens of thousands of conch, and it turns out that the further you get away from the major export markets and the most population, the older the animals are. So all this is to simply say, yes, Queen Conch have been overexploited, and fishing is a big deal for the species. In addition, they are still vibrant populations in very remote areas. Okay, and those populations where there's still lots of animals are breeding. How do we channel the energy of snail sex to replenish what's been lost, right? There's a fun haiku about it. But in short, we have these tasty snails that are disappearing. If we're interested in protecting parts of the population where they still remain, with the goal of replenishing what was lost. How do we do that? One of the ideas I also do this in because we collected data on grouper and lobster while we were there, and it turns out that the same general pattern of larger, older, more abundant animals are for these other iconic species as well. Reserves work for them. But the general question we're having is, do marine protected areas work? Right? So can you protect part of the population at a level at which it's sustaining the breeding population, and will that help places that are far away? I'm not a complete asshole, so when I wanted to investigate this, we teamed up with the local conservation organizations. So the equivalent of a funded national park service, the Bahamas National Trust, and we organized meetings with people to see what they thought about the folks. And a few quotes stuck out to me. Why do I like this one? Because it's cows.
Cows.
But also, I love this quote because they're like, yeah, whatever. You're telling me this park's going to do anything? F you. There's no chance. This is just made up. They'll cancel a Red Alert Disney film. And then there's also ongoing human rights issues that almost massive. So the general idea here is if you have a harvested population and then you have a park, you want to know if the park can send things to them to replenish that fishing pressure. In order to know whether or not the park will work, you have to know what's in there, right? So you can get dragged behind a boat and waters. At the same time, you'll also want to measure a bunch of animals because a park filled with babies is not effective, right? You also have to sort of understand how the ocean currents work, right? You want to know whether or not that park is replenishing itself, making it viable for long term, or if it's dependent on mystery populations outside the immediate.
Yeah. Right.
Here's a conch. It's minding its own business with a GoPro in front of it. And here comes Candace, and she's doing horrible things. Like touching them. They don't care. Conch is fine for 24 hours out of the water. This is really hot. Right? So, as part of our tow boards, we would find an aggregation, and then we'd stop and we'd measure a bunch of things. So measure how big it is, and how thick the shell is. Right? With, again, the idea that the thicker shells, older animals. What do you think our scuba sign for a lot of conch in an area is?
No, what is it?
Any guesses?
No guess.
A sign to indicate to a boat while you're being dragged behind it that you see a lot of conch.
On the ladder.
I know.
You're holding on with one hand. Put the other large. Right? Because they're pretty good. And that's not work sick. Why? They're not. Alright, so again, we're measuring shells because it's giving us indication on melted age, but we're not hurting them. So, like, think about rings on a tree, right? But we don't have to cut down a tree. We can just measure non-invasively how thick this animal shell is, and then we can estimate age. Count like great haiku. That's perfect. Take a sip of water. Here's some more gratuitous pictures of conch across their life history. What I want you to take away from this, thin juvenile shell, right? I could crush that in my hand if I felt so motivated, but I'm not.
Okay, how big is it? Still, okay.
Maybe this big. And then these are thick, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's like basically trying to crush a twig. They're in order to drill through conch to the air, you have to use a ceramic diamond to drill it.
Yeah.
But basically, what I'm trying to say is that conch rock harder as they get older.
Yes, they do. Very well done. How old can they be?
Great question. Yeah. So they can live, that we know of, up to 40, and that's based on a coral that was growing a shell, right? So probably a lot longer. I mean, and they reproduce throughout their entire life too. They just change up the way that they allocate energy. So the older animals are wiser and smarter, and they put more energy into each egg, so then fewer eggs. Next, park. Beautiful place. The Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park. I've been lucky enough to live there for parts of 3 years. And it's a phenomenal place because of these folks. And they have an armed guard who goes out with an AK-47 every day to make sure no one is messing with the things in that park. When they have gas, it's very effective. Okay? I had a fun encounter with the hammerhead years ago. Cool. So what people have been visiting this beautiful place for years, right? Scientists like pretty things too. And so when I was in elementary school, they went and they measured a bunch of snails. Same thing happened when I was in grad school, and then we repeated that effort. And what you'll notice is that this rough vein is going further and further towards the right, which is older and older animals. In addition, you notice that the young adult population is starting to disappear, at least in this aggregation. So these are from 6 different aggregations that we combined. So these are animals that are in a space that are breeding and replacing animals. And we're like, oh, what's going on here? They're slowly dying out of old age. So basically, you're having this senile population fall. Still very effective breeders, still doing what they need to do, but concerning for like what happens 30 years from now. And we want to know why. So, like any smart person, we went to a bar and we asked the locals, what do you think's happening? And they immediately said, oh, well, we're not allowed to machete sea turtles anymore, to harvest them. And in addition, we can't longline for sharks. So these protections have made so there's too many turtles and rays, and that is having a negative impact upon the population.
For people farming conch for like dietary, like for cuisine and stuff, or is it more for the ornamental to like have a copy?
We'll get into aquaculture and why
sorry.
it's built. No, yeah, that's a very valid question. It's a waste of time.
So it's like a jerk for eating me fight.
That's what the people, the locals are blaming regulation and the government.
Is that true though?
Well, well, let's see. All right, we know that the park sort of works, but then locals are saying, all right, well, these predators are eating all the cough. We can check that out. So we use squid pops to do that. These are basically garden snakes with lots of little squid on them. Here's an squid pops. Garden snake, generic tomato snake, 3 feet fiberglass. Little discus squid that I bought here in Chinatown. And then we punched out more than 1,000 by hand. Used a little piece of monofilament in the most delicate knots ever to attach them to this snake. And then we put out more than 1,000. With the idea of, if you do this strategically, if you check this line of squid pops after an hour and after a day, some of them are missing. And that gives you an idea of the relative pressure or the relative amount of consumption pressure in an area. So how many of these are being eaten is a standardized way of estimating predation pressure. So what we set up an experiment. We would put out 25 squid pops over a seagrass bed that was less than 100 meters away from 25 squid pops over a reef. We put cameras down so we could see who done it, and we did this inside and outside of the park over a month of horrible weather, which prevented the main objective for being accomplished. When we did this, it was great. So here's how we put it down. It's real simple. It typically looks to be 9 to 20 feet. Here's a queen triggerfish demonstrating how to collect data / do our experiment. And she's very excited to chew out little pieces of squid. Alaska is sponsoring the Olympic period, so we're familiar with ski solomoning. Sharks do it to squid pops. And it's a real problem because they're clumsy and dumb, and they would knock them over, and then the crabs would grab the steaks and pull them away. Oh my goodness. How many do you think we lost?
A lot. 40%.
Yeah. 80%.
2. Yeah, I'm not gonna.
Blaming on the dumb sharks.
Yeah, I do blame it on the dumb sharks. It made my life harder, but I can still find them. This is a cool shark though because it brought a little bit more up. Yeah, sort of fun. But most of the time we just had a massive squadron of snappers come through and just liquid food. At one point, Shedd's logo was like, look at nature in the eye, so I went to like a because that's cute. Whatever. Alright, so what did we find?
So, are those fish that are, how are they impacting?
They're not. Yeah, I'm just glossing over that entirely. Great question. We're asking basically, is there a habitat effect of fish-based predation pressure on squid pops? And we saw very clearly there's a lot more hovering mouths on a reef than a seagrass bed over an hour a day. And then a drum roll. Do we think there's more or less or equal predation inside a park versus outside park?
More inside. Yeah.
There's a lot more predators inside that park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the answer is, of course, nothing. Which was really great. Because you go back to the bar and be like, nah, sorry. It seems that, at least at this trophic level, there's not a grand shell. Cool.
So about the same in the unprotected.
Yeah, exactly. So that was an example of often life just doesn't work. But
I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I was like, well, you know what? I really like predation. It's really important for tasty snails. This is really something that's shaping their ecology. So I said, all right, cool. Well, we're going to try this again, and we're going to put out hydrophones in house. So what happens if you have a sea turtle come through and eat queen conch? What signals does that make into the water? Yeah, a really loud noise that propagates from a long distance. So our guy is, all right, we'll put out hydrophones, listen to the sounds of death, record who came through, and that'll just be great. And this is a short video of what we found. And these turtles that you see are, of course, not predators. They're grazers.
Oh, good.
So rather than having a bunch of rays and loggerhead sea turtles coming through eating conch, we used to have a bunch of green sea turtles eating grass. So that was sort of frustrating. Sometimes lots of them. Alright, so here's what I'm showing. Quite clearly, it's got grass and stuff.
There you go.
Also conveniently right next to our hydro stone. Here's a bunch of turtles worshipping said hydrophone because obviously they recognize greatness. Slash, it was mating season. And anything stimulates a turkey. But for the most part, we have animals basically head down and their booty up a little bit in the grass as they're taking bites. And then they'll take a few bites and then they'll sit there and they'll like burp, chew, and fart. So if you listen carefully, you might hear what it sounds like for a green sea turtle to chew on grass. Not the best, but
Nice
I
little
have.
campfire.
Yeah, it sounds like a campfire.
Well, it's someone chewing. So this is a spectrogram of the same thing. So you'll see a more intense red band means more. On the x-axis is time, and on the y-axis is a frequency. Right? So basically a musical score to the sounds of sea turtles chewing. So yeah, it's very quiet. They take a few bites and then they sort of like sit there and chew, right? But this is a very clear signal. So you can think about it. So why do we care about turtles grazing anyways? Well, there's this thing called climate change, which is not a hoax. And there is also tremendous ability for the ocean to sequester carbon. So this whole idea of blue carbon sequestration is very important. And by understanding how an animal is extracting and using energy from the bottom up, lets us place value on marine life. Not just for like looking at, but also for, letting us all drive our cars, etc. Or fly to wherever. Alright, so if you think about sea turtle grazing, we're interested, there's two different things, right? There's the bite, which is basically someone taking some of that grass out. And then there's the processing sound, which is different from every single turtle. But the whole point, right, is we have this very clear signal that we could use to determine when an animal is chewing. We built a really cool model that I'm not going to talk about it all today, but we'll be if you're a Shedd Aquarium volunteer, if you like come to lunch with me next week, about this. Cool. Why is it important? Well, we've teamed up with people from around the globe who also have hydrophones down in seagrass. And now we can actually provide a quantity for how much value turtles add to the ocean, which is sort of neat. We also did capture some predators, but they were really frustrating. So this is an eagle ray. Eagle rays have a face like a shovel. They use it to dig out things. They also will eat Queen Conch. But what they do is they grab the animal, and then when they're hunting, the behavior is they go up to the surface, and then they slowly glide and not swimming, taking the sound of them chewing far, far away from our experience. And they're really good at extracting all the meat and leaving all their shell fragments on the bottom. So that sure is a challenge. That's eagle ray. Nurse sharks have a very different, more brutal approach. They'll basically, they're vacuum cleaners, yeah, right? But if you've been surveying for Queen Conch and attracting the attention of the nurse shark, you'll know that they also have a mean streak. They'll basically grab the animal and then thrash until it's ripped out, so they're pretty strong. But what we were really looking for were these menacing dudes, loggerhead sea turtles. If you look at it, you're like, oh my god, yeah, it's got this weird, huge head. Here's me snorkeling over one. These are conch. Right? So clearly this smart turtle's gonna have a tasty meal.
Yes.
But it's a turtle. And they're not smart. But sometimes they are able to find food. So this is what happens when a loggerhead sea turtle bites through the dull Queen Conch shell. And as you might imagine, that makes a hell of a noise. We've been very fortunate to have other animals come and sit directly next to the hydrophone and pound conch. And this is what it looks like and sounds like. To have studied this process for a couple of years, to spend a lot of time looking at hundreds of thousands of pictures to verify that loggerhead sea turtles do crunch on conch shells. This is very exciting. That's it. So other animals are slow silent. So this is a horse conch devouring a live.
What is it?
If you take a horse conch, this is another giant. This is the stage shell of horse. Well, so it's just a big, it's like slightly larger than my fork, and it's eating this adult queen conch. But it takes them a lot of time, and they don't make any noise. They also eat a lot of conch. So how do we capture that predation? Well, we team up with other people who basically use a swab on freshly killed animals on their shell to identify who done it from that. Right? So now we'll go to aquaculture. Thanks, Pete, for that. So I've talked a lot about death, and that's natural. So these animals go through a crazy hurdle. For every 2,000 that settle onto the bottom, half of one will reach central maturity based on right? So, is it a smart idea to invest an absolute shit ton of money in making a few thousand conch a year when you already have a fishery that's extracting millions of conch a year? This is the Nicaragua one and Honduran fishery that feeds the United States based on child labor. So there's naturally low survival, and there's still really, really high demand. Too high to offset with culture. I would argue it's best to let the snails kind of for themselves and simply protect wild reproduction before it's too late to produce enough to be some sort of sustaining. Yeah, and that's all I want to say about aquaculture. But instead, I'll just take a beautiful video of what it looks like to have a lot of year 2 animals in the sky. So these persisted for about 3 days before they dispersed to just a massive pile.
That's in the Bahamas.
Yeah, this is in the Bahamas.
Do they typically gather to go this?
They do this, so we've heard of lobsters running away from the first winter storm. Perhaps they do like this long chain, antennas on each other's backs. Queen Conch do the same thing, but with mysterious purposes that we don't understand. And then other animals will come up and just sit there and eat. Yeah. So, sort of cool. Anyways, so we can get back to our main question. Sorry about the yes?
How fast do they move? How what distances do they actually move?
You're going to have to wait till the end of the talk. We talk about bouncing the egg here. Alright, so we have marine protected areas that sort of work for conch, but we're missing the next generation. These park predators have a naturally high mortality rate, right? So these animals, basically, they're running a gauntlet. Could the problem be just natural reproduction not reaching this park where we have this population slowly dying out of old age? In order to do that, we said, screw it, let's survey an even bigger area, and rather than just doing lots of towboard surveys, how about we do like 500 drift dives? Cool, let's do it. So I don't need to talk about scuba diving to anyone here. It's a fun, delightful process. Head first. This is what it looks like for me to interact with Queen Conch. What a delight. Measure the length.
Oh, you're measured.
Yep. Measure how thick the shell is. Look at the camera person, record my data, and go with my business.
Do the conch move a lot in their life?
They do, yes. This work was focused in on the exumas, which is right here, and we asked a couple of questions. Number one, are there more conch inside of this park? Right, before we're just looking at the long-term trajectory of population in the park, is there still more inside the park versus outside? In order to answer this, we did a bunch of drift dives through the 30 or 40 kilometers worth of the park. So north of the park, within the park, and south of the park. And this is going to be a series of histograms reflecting the same variation as the speakers in my way. North, within, south. Young animals, we found pockets throughout. Where do we think all the adult animals were? Inside of the park, of course. And where's all the breeding? Follows where the adults are. So we can answer this question and say, yes, there's more conch in the park and they're breeding. And what about protection? Does having a park warden matter? Right, this guy with the gun who's going out and making sure no one's messing with things. The idea being that the closer you are to where the patrol is happening, the more effective the enforcement is, therefore the older and larger the amp to be, because those are the most tempting targets for a fisher. And that's exactly what we found. Cool. Okay, so we can sort of update our question with, all right, where's the next generation of park? It seems to be working from the scale of an individual park. Great place to grow old and make babies, but the long-term existence of the park is in jeopardy. Could we protect strategically more parts of the population to make sure that we're having these babies come in? And in order to do this, we had to turn from things that you can easily touch, see, and count, which is my favorite, into looking at sort of the unseen processes that shape the ocean. So who's seen Finding Nemo?
No.
Finding Nemo? Probably 80% of you.
Yeah.
That's surprisingly low. So what were the sea turtles doing in Finding Nemo?
I don't know.
They're riding on the EAC, right? So they're taking these highways that connect different populations of animals together. When most marine animals are babies, they do ride in currents from place to place, and Disney did a pretty good job. You might even say they question. That's funny. Anyways, so now going from things that you can easily see into their babies. So I like to think of conch babies as upside down ice cream cones with cute little dumb cookies. So they use those lobes to feed on phytoplankton. They suck them into their shell and shadow come. They probably are also minimally photosynthetic, which is sort of cool. And then if you've heard of like zoos and belly and coral, guess what? Conch have them too, which is really weird because they're not exposed to the light, so it's really parasite. Anyway, so I used individual-based biophysical Lagrangian models of aquatic transport to explore its processes. It's a mouthful to say, but it's actually not that challenging. So think about a model, right? And not like
Ew.
like a model, like something that predicts something else, right? So these are models that predict something. Lagrangian is just a word for movement at the scale of an individual. And then biophysical explains itself. So you're able to put various different biological and physical properties together to examine and disperse them. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to. But instead, I'll just show you basically a video of what you release millions upon millions of little particles into the ocean. And then if you do that enough over enough time, then you can start build up a probability field for how any two places in the ocean have connected together. That's what that is. We did that in Exumas, and what we found is basically they're sending larvae to the north from the arc while being dependent on populations to the south. But the populations of the south are thought to be entirely gone because of overfishing. Also teamed up with a geneticist. I can model things, but I have no ability to know X. Other people do, and it turns out that my model matched up really freaking well with what they were measuring throughout the Caribbean. It's on 16 different places, so we have some confidence that what we're estimating is what sort of reality. So we published that in 2019, then we went back in 2000. Oh, yeah, later in the year in 2019, and we said, okay, so we think that there's going to be larvae going to the north, so there should be more animals to the north, and we think that the rootstock should be to the south, but it's all gone. So we did 4 drift dives, and we said, oh, hey, look, there's almost nothing to the south. Talk about boring. But an order of magnitude 5 towards the north. And yeah, so it's really nice when science does work. And it did match our hypothesis. So what do we know about marine protected areas? And are they fairy tales? Or do they work? Well, it turns out it's a great place for conch to live. However, over the longer period of time, inequality in terms of how animals are dispersed, variability in oceanic routes, and then also overfishing basically has shaped it so that some places are no longer getting a steady supply of the next generation, which puts their long-term existence into trouble. Cool. Oh yes, fieldwork is very stylish. And you're all divers, so I'd like to introduce you to my swimming tool. So I've worked on this for years. It is a rash guard that was medium that I slowly stretched out so that it goes well past my knees. And it has the ability to protect me if I'm sitting in a stiff by simply putting it in my knees. I recommend everyone try and do it. Also looks great as you flutter along. Anyways, summary haiku about marine parks. Great.
Oh, I didn't finish.
That's it.
Okay.
Very long.
You have a ticker.
Understand this person very much.
So, good there.
Yep.
One of the really great things about being a scientist at Shedd is that we can publish things that aren't just read by other scientists, but are shared by the media. And you get a completely different reaction when you share conservation stories with the media. And it causes people who have actual power, like this gentleman, to then have to react to what you're saying. And he did. He basically followed the recommendations that we placed and said, yeah, we're going to do this. And you're like, yeah, whatever. It was an election year, right? So there's tremendous, and the Bahamas, much like other places, have two parties, which is a foolish way of going about things. So it creates this polarization. But they made all these claims, and then they passed it into law in 2020, which was really cool. It was really great up until December 2020 to work in the Bahamas. At that point, they decided that they didn't want any more research going on. So we took our talents to South Beach, which is a really great place to work because it is in fact called the public. You can see it right there on the flag of Key West and the seal of the city. It's also been illegal to harvest Queen Conch since '85.
Wow.
Right? Yet the population still hasn't recovered, and the United States is the largest consumer of Queen Conch. Get real. Thanks, cruise ships. So we took this opportunity to develop a few different strategies that we can deploy to better understand where animals are found and how we might be able to protect them if they're in trouble. Which brings up Valentine's Day 2024. Who remembers it? Any special memories? 2024. It's really great for me. Because that's when NOAA listed Queen Conch on the then existing Endangered Species Act as threatened. So this then put a little bit of public opinion and pressure to be able to better raise awareness of these animals and what the threats are that they're facing. Okay, so we started developing new tools. One is using Edna. Basically, we pair up a scuba survey in a circle with someone pumping water out to describe how many basically there to place. We did this throughout the Florida Keys, and we found really good matches between BDNA in aquariums versus the people was an aquarium, and we're excited to see what happens when the field surveys. Which brings up one of the things that we found. Conch tend to still be in Florida, but the places that they are found are quite inconvenient. Everyone loves to go and dive on a wreck, dive on a reef. No one wants to dive on the 8-foot rubble bed with extremely high currents, unless you're me. And it turns out that there's lots of conch in these places that aren't easy. In addition, this is off of Fort Lauderdale. There's a major cruise ship channel there, but more importantly, this is the lifeline of oil into South Florida. They move the big tankers offshore, and then they use a little caddy to go in and out. So what they want to do is they want to blow up more than 100 hectares of the reef right outside so they can anchor the ships closer to get a little bit easier access to oil, which is great. But it's very inconvenient if you're a conch that is literally breeding right there. Or if you're the last stronghold in U.S. mainland waters of Acropora cervicornis, which is also found right there, and it is a endangered. So this might not be a great place to blow up. But if you are going to blow it up, we don't want to hurt this cute little snail, right? That'd be mercy. That would be horrible. So started asking the question. Well, if they're gonna blow this up, can we at least like move Kough first? Is that gonna be okay? Is that gonna save them, or is that gonna do anything? So we've been tracking movements for the past 4 years in Florida. So these are not natural points. All right, so we know how it should be, right? This nice interaction, very, very relaxing, measure, collect data. Sometimes, oh god, whoa, that harmless snail jumped a little bit and scared the shit out of me. But this is the way that they move. So they don't slime along from place to place. They leap along the path, which is why they taste so good, right? They're developing this powerful muscle to jump from place to place, and it's that muscle that everyone's keen, right? For a scientist, it's also great because you have this very clear signal. You can tell when this is sped up. This is real time. This is how fast they move. Pretty exciting. You can also see this cute little proboscis. This is keeping this for this type of plate. But you see they sit there. They're great at sitting, motionless, shell not moving. And then eventually they move. And it's a very, very clear signal, right? If you speed this up to 200x, it's very exciting. First time I did this, I was like, oh my god, I'm like, David, this is so cool. Look at these snails. God, it's exciting. They also have some of the largest eyes for snails. So they use them. And they're very, very visual animals. They use them to find mates and also to avoid things. They like almost never knock into each other unless they have sexual intent. So I like this because there's this little trio here. One's like, fuck this, I'm gone. This guy's like, all right, I'm out of here. And then the other one's like, okay, time to eat. Which is pretty fun. But yeah, they don't like run into each other. So here, another will come right up, stop, and you're like, oh, you go. Follow. Right, and just there as if you watch that. So here's another video. This is an animal sitting there eating shell. And you can see it uses its proboscis, doesn't move its shell. Versus even a juvenile, the way that they move is they jump. So,
How far can they see?
I don't know. Yeah, great question. They move a lot less when it's very, very turbulent.
Water. We've seen them down California. Get your vision, can't and it's disappeared shell. So you try to figure out the right distance or can't feel it.
It's also about time. So we'll get to my Kough creeping second. So we built these devices. Scientist equals no money equals use cheap things. In this case, a GoPro case to keep a custom built accelerometer package. Just using Raspberry Pi thumbs. But basically we just have a chip that's recording constantly acceleration profiles as well as direction, and then another chip that's a clock, and a motherboard for a small program. We put that all in this GoPro case, drilled into a hole on a conch, and then we're like, be free! But we want to find them and recover our data, so we also put an active acoustic transmitter. So this is a small tag that just goes at a frequency that no one can hear, not even a dolphin. Continuously. So if you have an underwater headset and direct to your phone, you're able to use that to find it. Also, this isn't like a big inconvenience for the snail. There's our package. It weighs about 9 grams. After considering buoyancy, versus this is a live conch with Niger's colony, and so it's kind of encrusted with fire coral.
Oh, cool.
So people are often forbidden from their divers. I can't tell you how many GoPros have been added to my collection, but this one was special because I found it on the rubble bed. I was like, oh, baby, we're putting that on Kough. So this is RoboCough. He's got his data package and a GoPro. So this is video from him. As he lurches across the floor. At the same time, this is data that's collected. So this is like the same time that the camera's looking, right? And what you'll see is when the pink cross is there, it's a high acceleration signal, and the conch moves. You're back. We. Right. And I'll just let the anticipation build. So you were asking earlier about crop movement, how far they go, all this. Well, they don't go fast. But you'll see as soon as we start to make another mighty lurch.
Spencer's killing me. I can't take it.
I know. Imagine having hours and hours of this to watch. What the? So much progress. I'm not going to play the next one because you can tell that he's next to another cock and there's a lot of fixed high. Anyways, so we put all these out on conch and then we watch 3 times. So you can all see the conch here, right? There's the tag. Oh. Here's the answer. So it's really easy to find them not. But we're pretty good at it at this point. Typically I just free dive. But sometimes it's easier for other people to take pictures on the scoop button. So we'll have a nice festive argument at the surface about whether or not a conch is nearby. And they get in the water and listen. And you can get right up to an animal and get it. So we've done this a lot. It doesn't hurt them either. So this is after just a month of being drilled. The conch has regrown shell over the whole gum into it. So
Fingernail.
basically, or pearl if you're into buying. So I should really think about how to monetize this. I don't know how. Anyway, yeah, I'm still learning how to use GoPro. So now I'm gonna. We want to talk about this bigger.
Test them. Right.
Yeah. So how did we use this? I'm going to run through a paper in like 5 slides. I hope that it works. Our question is, can we remove conch from harm's way? And in order to do that, we want to know how active they are, how far they move, and how far we should protect around the breeding application. Right? First thing we did is spend hours of life underwater in 10 feet of water following conch. So to your point earlier, they often retract. But if you wait it out like 5 minutes, you establish a trust relationship with them. And then they're happy to bounce along. So we've measured, I think it's like 30-something animals for a long time, and found that they basically move 6 centimeters a hop. Cool. This was very frustrating. Yeah, and we just put a piece of flagging at the back of their shell and then measure every single one of the hops they did. Sometimes they realized that we weren't causing a problem, and then there's lots of biological water cursing because they jump faster than we could measure. Okay, so 6 centimeters a hop. Then we want to know, okay, how often are they hopping and what controls it? So we put these biologgers out and we found that, hey, during the breeding season, they're a lot more active. About 23 hops an hour.
Oh.
Next, I built a simple model looking at how far they're hopping, how far they turn between relative hops, and how often they're hopping. We used that to create a rough distance that they move over the course of a breeding season away from center. Okay. Then I combined that with about 700 drift dives that we did to look at the distances separating snails, with the goal of looking at are 2 snails in the same aggregation. And what we found, and we used that threshold to determine that difference. Okay, and what we did there is basically we established a distance that is bigger than 95% of the comp aggregations. Therefore, if you find a mating comp and you want to put spatial protections into action without serving anything more, this is a great distance that will be a first look at protection trap. Okay, that was my attempt. We also just moved comp between places, right? We wanted to see whether or not if you pick animals up and move them, what happens. Because most often it's like this beautiful feel-good story, right? You're like, oh my god, the forest is on fire, and there's all these koalas burning. So they pick them up, and then they release them in the bushes to die somewhere else, right? Because it sounds great, it's this wonderful conservation tool for building awareness, but whether or not it actually works is very rarely investigated. We want to not make that mistake with keep on. So we set up this experiment looking at animals sourced from one site, all breeding aggregations. So they have the food and the mates that are completely happy. and we moved them. We moved them up to about 20 kilometers away, while also returning some right back to where we found. So we did that in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and we also did it in Ground Zero for dredging. What did we find? This mess. So we tracked them for 420 days. That's what the x-axis is. And they moved. The control animals, so distance that they moved away from where we released them is on the y-axis, and time is on the x. If you adjust this to a log scale so that you can better see this little cluster start, you see basically that they slowly move further and further away. However, they did not move further than that distance that we predicted would be sufficient to protect them. For the control animals, for the animals that we picked up and moved somewhere else, look at the start first, and you see that they immediately freaked out, and so they hopped to it and just got the hell out of there. Some of them just disappeared.
And you after you moved them?
So they weren't happy with being moved. So I had this initial freak out, and then often they would just go bye-bye. If you look at the direction that they went, here straight up is right back towards home. And these are the control animals. They didn't really care. But oh look, they're going right back to where we took them away from. Wow. So they freak out and head home. That's not great if you're trying to protect them. We're also, again, pretty good at finding snail shells, even when they're buried in the sediment, because of that delightful you can hear that down 20 centimeters to the sediment to get to dig it. And we did this before, and we found no mortality. When we started this experiment 2 years ago, we were like, oh, hot damn, nothing happened at first. And then we came back and we were like, oh my god, about a fifth of the animals that we moved are dead.
Right.
That march of death continued. And then we're like, well, at least it's only the translocated animals that have died. So then I controlled the society eaten by horse before it continued. Basically, we found an order of magnitude higher death in animals that we moved to a new location. Not unexpected, just something to bear in mind. And I think that happened because these animals move slow. Their shells are this great canvas for different marine life to grow on. Algae, slugs sometimes, coral, all sorts of stuff grows on a shell. And it changes as the substrate changes over the course of the year. So these are two different animals. And you can see that they grow completely different camouflage patterns naturally over the course of the year. Right? So if you move them, they stick out like a sore thumb and then they're eaten. We still have hope. So this lady, you can see she's completely regrown over her bolt. This is more than a year later, and she's happily laying eggs in her new home. So she didn't run away, and it turns out she discovered that, there's plenty of potential mates here, and we can lay eggs and reproduce. So that means that there is hope for moving home, but we just have to figure out how to do it better. Okay, so there's a fun haiku on it, and I'll end with just a picture of my favorite cow. Okay, and it's a lady. So she grows this. This is off of Molasses Reef. If you're also there, you can go onto the rubble bed that's right in front of it. You have the jagged hole that your boat operators would say, "Go nowhere near this." And she was being mated, and this wonderful flamingo tongue recruited into her coral. Right, so we can just sort of sum up the top. And then, any sort of questions?
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions?
Is it the same species in Cozumel?
Yep.
How do they grow their shells? What's the mechanics?
Well, I'm not a snail. But I assume it's the same way that a lot of different animals change the chemistry of the water to facilitate calcium carbonate accretion. So basically anywhere that their mantle touches while they're alive, they're able to basically slime over it, and then it grows your shell. it's just like a coral, right? So the same thing, you have this veneer of tissue that basically pumps out ions to make so the calcium soccer so that they're just chemical engineers.
Thank you. They're so cut.
Given their proximity to the substrate of the ocean, were you surprised to find that they mostly are filtrators as opposed to consuming stuff off the substrate?
So they eat lots of detritus, so any sort of dead trash they're great at eating, and they also tend to eat cyanobacteria. So basically, photosynthetic slime out and no one else wants.
Yeah.
So, but then think about this. So you have this giant snail that has a substrate of different things growing on it, hopping along the bottom, and the places that it hops to, it then cleans. What a perfect way for spreading whatever it's growing on the shell. So it has this ability then to basically colonize the flowering areas. So if the NSF was still friendly to us, I would try his.
Thank you.
Yeah. What?
Color again, it said.
Oh, I have no idea. Good question.
That's a very cool.
Yeah, for sure. It varies by clump, by age, by location. So the babies, often they have a very different spiky pattern, depending on where they're found. Higher flow areas, more food areas. Naturally, they bury, but some babies can't bury if they're a hard substrate, and they get a very different shelling. The spikiness is adaptive because it makes it so that a predator can't just swallow the whole. And then if it's a predator that crunches, those spikes diffuse out the pressure and make it hard to crack their shell.
So you were talking about description. Are there other kinds of species that you all call conch? And do you just make your own kind?
Yeah, it's generally a good idea to make with your own species. We have laws to protect other species from big mistakes. But in Florida, there's
Or Ohio.
So there's 4 species of conch that are all the same spot in Florida that you'll see constantly together. They don't hybridize as far as we know. That's a good question.
How deep do they live and breed and all that?
Oh, yeah, I forgot to. There's this great quote in the Associated Press article that came out about, think about the depths of the ocean, they're limitless. The conch will always come back. And so what we're seeing is that suddenly people are finding conch deeper and deeper. But the reason is just because they're looking there because there's no conch left shallow.
They're running away.
So they're like, they're running to the deep. And it's like, no, they're not. You've eaten all of them in the shallow water, and only the lucky few that have been growing are survivors. So it creates a solution. And because they have to gather to breed, that means that you can eat them down to the last aggregation, right? A fisher is unaware. If it takes them a few hours to find an aggregation, who gives a shit? They can sit on it and fish all day, right? So what's a few more hours of searching? So it was very telling when we went from island to island and asked, and they're like, you used to just be able to go hook them for shore. We can't do that anymore. But there's still plenty of conch. And they're only saying that because you find an aggregation, there's an absolute more than you can harvest easily. But those aggregations are further apart. I think a famous example in reef dynamics is with humphead wrasse or something like that. No, it's parrotfish, shit. But they sleep in a lagoon en masse. And the locals go out and they slay on spears at night, sleeping together. And you can slay out the entire population. And up until the last day, you're like, oh my god, there's so many of them. And then that's just not fair.
So they do the deeper, 30 feet, 100 feet?
Yeah, they've been found down to 40 meters, so under 20.
Yeah.
But if they're eating detritus, but also side effect things that require light, it does put a bit of a cap on the productivity at keep it ducks.
So you're going to continue to study conch, or are there new studies that you've been doing?
I like conch. I didn't really find them very exciting until we started looking at them. And I'm like, okay, these things are pretty kick-ass. Like, they're just jumping around. They're not like a dumb snail where it's like, you could follow the slide jump, find an egg. No, they have to like see what's up. But right now I'm also working on sunflower sea stars, which is an endangered species for out west that got degraded by a emergent disease and climate change. Yeah, all the hat is really good over your stack and Shedd has a really good history of raising them. But because we're in the Midwest, we're not using natural ocean water, which means that the risk of disease is very low. So this is a great way of seeing how we can raise them without introducing
This year is a time for fun. So, just a little biography. I got married in Puerto Rico, and when I got married, the officiant like blew a big conch shell or whatever. So that's why I'm so interested. Well, like, do you have an idea as to how much of the predation, like human predation, on those toxics from dietary versus ornamental shells, or?
Because like
I feel so bad.
99.9% is diet.
Okay, I feel so good about my wedding now.
You should congratulations on surviving.
I do discourage people buying ornamented.
No, you can.
I was thinking like,
That,
what should we be doing? Like when we go to when I
Eating more shrimp.
Well, so seafood, right? One of the things that gets me going, I'm eating. But as a climate or so. But people are like, oh, I tend to avoid these animals from land because it's so sad to raise them to die. And it's like, well, at least they're being raised to die. And there's such the ocean. There's no sewing. It's all to be. So talking about this, so you're better enjoy that fish. But yeah, I would say if you're buying a conch shell, if it's been cracked on its spire, like that's how they harvest them. So it's a great byproduct of them, and you're allowed, I think, 2 shells internationally. I mean, that's.
So when I was in Puerto Rico, I was just diving a lot and I found a ton, but I couldn't show them my kids. I put back.
Yeah, it's great habitat.
Like not to be hurting them.
Phenomenal place to find octopi if you're really into octopi. Flip over shells and look inside. Obviously, be careful. My hands have been attacked by a wide range of life. But I think that there's also some great stuff to find. Lots of ways to shells or something.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. How fun is your research?
If you feel like funding the research, no, Shedd Aquarium. So they've made a commitment towards not just protecting and being like a voice for the Midwest for the ocean, right? So like, am I being recorded right now?
We can turn it off if you want.
Never happens. I just don't get to that. But yes, please visit Shedd Aquarium. It supports a wide range of different conservation and wild life.
This has been great for somebody who's not a scientist by background to understand your methodology and the importance of this and this apply the same kind of methodology to other things to come up with the facts that support the suppositions that we was kind of like a verbal, really good scientific American.
My heart sings.
But I'm not very.
No, that's great. No, I appreciate that.
Oh, nice. It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone got something out of it.
Yeah.
Translate.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining Conch.